1994 brought on the promise of a new and ethical democratic state where the rule of law will prevail. But 30 years later, our state has been defined by corruption scandal after corruption scandal, where corruption has become the order of the day. Did something go wrong at the beginning of our democracies? Were our institutions not designed where the rule of law takes center stage and it is embedded in the DNA of those institutions? My name is Oliver Dixon. Welcome to Democracy 30. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight we ask that post-apartheid government failed to prevent governance failures even in the past 30 years. Joining me for this discussion this evening is Reverend Frank Shikane, former Director General in the Presidency from 1994 up until 2009, as well as Renate Gotado, former Democratic Alliance Member of Parliament from 1999 till 2005. We're going to start the conversation off by taking a look at the very beginning of our democracy and ask the question, what were the conversations that were being had when our institutions were being built and designed? Reverend Shikane, I want to start with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. You were intimately involved in building our institutions, and it takes a lot of work to build an institution, especially one that is supposed to stand the test of democratic time. When institutions were being built, structures were being set up, people were being appointed, to what extent did conversations about the rule of law take part in those conversations, and how do you build an institution, I assume was the question, where the rule of law is seeped so deeply into the crevices of these institutions that they can't fail?
Yeah, no, let me just say, I will come back to your introductory comments because I think they are critical and I've got a particular view about it. But let me say, I am one of those people who struggled for a free South Africa, paid a huge price. Many died for us to establish the type of South Africa we want. Many never saw the freedom. People like O.R. Tambo, died before he was able to see the totality of it. And Hani was assassinated before he saw the totality of it. We were determined to produce the best constitution with the best constitutional institutions. A constitutional state was our objective, where nobody can abrogate the rights of the people, not even the president. And we made sure that, you can even charge a president if he committed a crime or corruption. And I think we achieved that objective. I'd call it one of the best constitutions. Others say is the best. And with the best institutions, we also use the best in the world. The United States Constitution can allow somebody to be found guilty today, go to prison and campaign for elections from prison. We couldn't allow a thing like that. So we perfected it using the Canadian Constitution, the Nordic constitutions, made sure that we have got a constitution that can stand the test of time and that it will allow nobody to violate our rights again as they were violated. And I want to say to you, that constitution stands up to now. If you go to my Twitter, which is called X now, you will see how I've followed it as it was implemented from the elections up to the formation of a government. That it stood the test of time. The electoral system is one of the best in the world. I'm told we're amongst the first 4 in the world. So I don't think the institutions failed. If you want to hear from me, I would say the institutions were captured, and once you capture them, they had to wriggle out, and it took about 15 years to get out of it. And I can come back to that, but I'm sure this is sufficient for your introduction. Yeah, thank you.
How do you capture an institution?
You see, the country, we're fast asleep. This country focused more on what is the ANC doing and why would it do that? The ANC is corrupt. And, up to the elections, it was the same. What the country is failing to understand is that the ANC itself was captured from inside. And that's why we had the capture of state institutions. And those who did it were very organized. They're not fools. They knew the first thing you destroy is your intelligence services. They knew the next is crime intelligence, so that you can determine who gets arrested and the real criminals go away. The next is the police and the military, the prosecution authority. You know that the prosecution authority was re-engineered to produce a particular outcome. And there was even an attempt to bring in the judiciary into it. And I must say, I've said it before, we must thank our constitution that our judiciary couldn't be captured. If it was captured, it would have ended up being an Italian mafia and will end up with criminals governing the country. Look at what has happened to Haiti. The first black republic in the world ended up being governed by criminals. Obviously, the colonialists were part of that process. That's another history. And left Haiti the way it is. What has happened to Libya? The same. What happened to Iraq? The same. And if we failed to resist that exercise and capture, we would be gone by now. I'm happy that we have succeeded. And indeed, people are beginning to get arrested. You have to clean up the intelligence services. We haven't finished. We have the police intelligence services, crime intelligence. They are killing even the top crime fighters because it's a battle within, so that we can flush out those who are here to destroy this country and destroy the constitution. You can hear even the language of saying, let's change this constitution. They want a constitution which Rolf Mayer talked about. Those who want to change it want to take us back to the apartheid days where there was no constitution. You got detained, tortured, kept in prison without committing any crime, and it was acceptable. And the president of the country could do a decree. No. This constitutional democracy, it's exactly what we wanted. And it's being cleaned up now, and you will see, and we're going to get younger generation to come in and defend our constitution and prepare for a better future for themselves using this constitution.
Yeah. Lynette, I want to come to you. Apartheid itself was built, and the foundation of it was corruption. Apartheid was a corrupt state. The dawn of democracy brought upon the hope that corruption is now behind us, that people can't yield their power without scrutiny. And one of the very first big corruption scandals in democratic South Africa, which you were a part of being on the oversight side of as a member of SCOPA in Parliament, and I remember Patricia de Lille playing a crucial role in bringing to light this, was the arms deal scandal. That was the first conversation around corruption in democratic South Africa. But we are 20, 30 years after democracy, after the dawn of democracy, and we're still having the conversation about the arms deal. The question is, does rule of law really stand the test of time in South Africa?
Well, you're taking me back to very ancient history, because since being on SCOPA, a lot of other things have happened in the past 22 years, including like Reverend Chikane working on the country's elections and a variety of other matters. So I think that the crucial issue is that Reverend Chikane took us right back to where we need to start, which is the transition years. And if you look back at the transition years, and this is another area where Reverend Chikane will have a very strong recollection, in the TRC period, there were very challenging conversations about the role of business and a variety of other civil society and other institutions that also came to the TRC, did testimony, in some cases did testimony in a slightly unsatisfactory form. And I think if we want to have a real conversation about the rule of law, we shouldn't start with the arms deal. We should start and go back a bit further and go back all the way to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and its own reports and all the various issues that were due to flow from that report. if we don't look at things a little bit more deeper historically, and we don't contextualize things a little bit more deeply historically, we will keep chasing every single corruption-related headline without a deeper and comprehensive understanding of how deeply we still have unfinished business with the past, the present, and indeed the future, which I think we need to also have a conversation about. I think one of the areas that Reverend Chikane also highlights is that the institutions are strong. But I think there are a variety of areas where we need to focus on what's happened in the past 30 years beyond corruption debates. I think we need to ask, did we need as many structural changes to the structure of cabinets that we saw between different presidencies? We need to ask whether we had sufficient sustainability in office with long-term timeframes for directors generals, and that would include Reverend Chikane in terms of the roles that he played in the past. In terms of electoral laws, I think what we need to look at here is what is the role of our Chapter 9 institutions? You may recall another late South African great fighter for democracy and for human rights, Prof. Khada Asmal, did a brilliant report reviewing Chapter 9 institutions in which he made a whole host of recommendations about how we can strengthen the very bedrock of our society and our democratic institutions. And it's something that, the new administration should dust off and look at and see how it can implement it. It would be remiss of us not to remind ourselves that Parliament, the executive, all the various institutions of constitutional democracy are there to ensure progressive realization of rights. I think we've lost, in some ways, the core focus on rights realization, which ought to be the top priority in our country still today. So there are a lot of unresolved issues, past, present, future, that will come to the surface as we traverse this very brave new path that is being taken.
Yeah, I'm going to pause you there, Annette. I do want us to take a break. When we come back from the break, we ask the question, integrity, where do you find it? Can you teach it? And can you embed it into our institutions? We're asking that question on the other side of this. Don't go away. Welcome back to Democracy 30. I'm in conversation with Reverend Frank Chikane, former Director General in the Presidency, as well as Renette Gotado, former DA Member of Parliament in 2000 till 2005. Before we go back to the conversation, I want to take you, put your attention to this particular graph, which measures transparency of at least perception of corruption in South Africa. There's a very poignant adage in South African democracy, which is justice must not just be done, it must also be seen to be done. And this is one of those graphics that speaks to how well South Africans perceive corruption to be a problem in the country. In 1999, there was a high level of confidence in the state. In fact, the highest level of confidence in the state was around 2007. That dipped sharply, where around 2009 about, as you can see over there, that there was almost no confidence in the state. Well, confidence in the state grew back slowly and gradually until 2015, when it looked like things were getting better. But it is around 2023 where confidence in the state dipped right back down to the low levels of 2009, 2010 about. It means that the vast majority of South Africans in 2023 had very little faith around the perception of corruption in the country compared to 2020, 2019 over there. Reverend Chikane, I want to bring you back into the conversation here. This is ultimately about the trust and belief in the people that lead our institutions. Institutions don't lead themselves, no matter how strong they may have been designed. If the people that lead our institutions are without integrity and are recalcitrant, the perception of trust in those institutions go down. Here, I want to appeal to your work not just as a technocrat in building our democracy, but also as a reverend. Can you actually teach integrity?
Well, I think before we talk about teaching integrity, I think that graph is very helpful, actually. It shows you that we started well. I wished it showed the numbers, as Renette had talked about the numbers before 1994. It would actually be very interesting to see how it looks like. And you can see there was a heavy effort to built the country out of apartheid, and by 1999 you had the highest confidence, and then it went back 2007. I thought that's very interesting. You will remember that by 2007, the country was performing at its best. The economy was performing at its best. It was growing at 5.6%, and our target was 6% to get rid of poverty in this country. And then, of course, something happened and we went down again. And I think that's really important before we go to the teaching of ethics and integrity issues, that I say that there were people who captured the ANC and these elements of the state and used them for their purposes, and corruption became worse by the day. I think we should say, before I talk about teaching, we should say that people of South Africa resisted this. From 2015 on, we said no to this direction. And you know, there have been huge battles within the ANC itself about this matter, and the veterans who took a stand against it. I think we got the commissions, they produced reports, we know exactly what the problem, but we did not have the policing part to make sure, and the prosecution authority, to make sure we catch these criminals. I think we have made progress now. The issue is when a system gets corrupted, people recalibrate their position to a lower level of understanding of ethics, corruption, integrity. We have a huge task to actually make sure that we re-educate our people to say that corruption is not cool, to say that stealing from the people is the most counter-revolutionary action you can ever commit, to say to people that to take the people's money and become a billionaire or a millionaire and then leave them poor is not cool. That state resources have to be used for the people of South Africa, especially the poor. We need to let our people understand that becoming rich quick, it's not a solution to the problems of South Africa. The problems of South Africa need all of us to use our brains, our resources, to deploy them, to make the lives of people change. People shouldn't live in a place where there's sewer in the streets and where there's no water when it should be there, where there's no electricity when it should be there, when there are pit latrines when they shouldn't be there. I think we should say to this nation, this is not what South Africa is about.
Absolutely. Renette, I want to ask you this. You say that what we need to deal with are problems that precede our democracy, and ultimately that our democracy was birthed on the bedrock of a lot of unresolved issues. I understand that to fundamentally mean that we started from a position of a system being corrupt. Now, if a system is corrupt and you build upon that system, can you at any point uncorrupt that system, especially the institutions that system relies upon?
You know, I think there's been a lot of work done about this by an organization called Open Secrets. And I think the fundamental issue that one would need to address is to recapture some of the work that's been done by civil society over many years and to see how to mainstream those conversations once more. And I agree completely with Reverend Chikane. If we lose sight of what is really important, and that is the human rights agenda and ensuring that the living conditions of South Africans are improved, we are going to see an exacerbation of the levels of trust dropping that we've seen in the graphs that you've represented. We've just had an election in which a large component of our population also did not vote. I mean, as much as we have a lot to celebrate in the way that we've had peaceful transitions of power and various other elements that are still in play, the issue here is that there are also people who have lost trust and lost faith in the democratic project. And that is a collective tragedy that we are all co-responsible for, all of those who were in public life for a long period of time now. And I think that is something that, you know, we can all step away from elements of responsibility, but I think it's extremely important to understand that this is a collective systemic failure on a whole lot of different levels where people need to step back up to the plate and say, what did we build in the transition years? How strong and robust is what we built? Why was it so easy to have the levels of capture that are being pointed out by Reverend Chikane? And, despite the efforts that have been made to reverse that, how do we reinforce such efforts? What do we do to step forward and to ensure that the levels of trust don't exacerbate? There is a completely new dynamic now between a government of national unity and an entirely new set of players on opposition benches. And if there's not a very seriously minded conversation to instill confidence in the ongoing consolidation of the democratic project, that will be a very big tragedy where we will see again an exacerbation of the graphs that you've highlighted.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. Renette Gotaro, thank you so much for your time and your insights this evening. Really appreciate it. Reverend Chikane, thank you so much for your time, your insights, and being a fantastic interlocutor and enriching our conversations greatly. Really do appreciate it. That's all we have time for this evening. Look, we've got another episode of Democracy 30 coming up next week, so please don't stay away. Join us. Set those alarms, set those reminders, and let's continue the conversation on X. Follow me. It is at Oliver_speaking, and you can simply find us at SABC News. Oliver Dixon on Facebook as well. From myself and the team, it's good night for now. Stay well.